She thought it was just another rainy day. A sick baby in her arms, a wrong car at the curb, and no time to double-check the license plate. But when a struggling single mom accidentally steps into the SUV of a mysterious tech CEO, her entire life takes a turn no one saw coming. What began as a mistake becomes a moment that changes everything. Stay with us, because this story will stir your heart in ways you won't expect. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The rain came down in thin, endless sheets, tapping against windows and rushing into gutters like the city was trying to cry itself clean. Nora Ellis stood at the edge of the sidewalk near 17th, and Marlo, soaked through despite her hood. Her arms were wrapped tightly around her baby, Luna, who was barely 9 months old and burning with fever. Nora bounced gently on her heels under a narrow overhang outside a closed pet supply store, whispering soft words to calm her daughter. Luna let out a tired whimper, her chest rattling with each shallow breath. The cough had started 2 days ago. By last night, her temperature had spiked so high Nora hadn't slept a minute. The community clinic across town only took walk-ins before noon, and it was already 11:23. Missed the window today, and the next available visit would be nearly 2 weeks out. Luna didn't have 2 weeks. She looked at her phone again. The Uber she'd ordered was a minute away. Her fingers were freezing, but she tightened her hold on her daughter and waited. Just then, a sleek black SUV rolled up to the curb. The plate ended in 142, which matched what her screen said. Without hesitation, Nora opened the back door. "Thank you for getting here so fast," she said breathlessly. "My baby's very sick. Can we go, please?" She slid in, cradling Luna closer, her diaper bag slipping from her shoulder and landing softly on the clean leather floor. The vehicle was spotless. No smell of food, no crumbs, no soft jazz playing from a tinny speaker. That was odd, but she was too tired to care. What mattered was getting Luna to the clinic. Then came a voice. Calm. Clear. A little confused. "Who are you and why are you in my car?" Nora froze. Her hand gripped the strap of her bag. She looked toward the front. A man sat in the driver's seat, dressed in a gray coat, dark sweater underneath, no Uber sign on the dashboard. His hands rested loosely on the wheel, his expression unreadable. I thought this was my ride," she stammered. "I ordered a car. The license plate said 142. "This is 124, the man replied, his voice even. He turned slightly in his seat and met her eyes through the mirror. His gaze was sharp, pale blue, and calm in a way that made her stomach twist. "I'm so sorry. I must have read it wrong," Nora said quickly, reaching for the door. "I'll get out." But before she could open it, Luna let out a hard, dry cough. Her little body shook in Nora's arms, her eyes fluttering closed from the effort. The man turned fully now, watching the child. His jaw tightened, then relaxed again. "She's burning up," he said softly, almost to himself. Nora nodded, swallowing the panic that kept rising in her throat. "She's been sick for days. The clinic closes soon. I can't miss the window." "I'll just call another ride," he interrupted her, not with impatience but with purpose. "I'll drive you." Nora blinked. "Wait, what?" "I'll take you to the clinic," he said, shifting the car into gear. "She doesn't look like she can wait around in the rain for another car." "But you don't even know me." "I don't need to," he said. "I can see your daughter needs help." Nora didn't speak. Her instincts screamed at her to be cautious, but there was something about his tone, measured, steady, kind. Not warm exactly, but not cold either. She didn't know what to say, so she just whispered the clinic's name. "Brooklyn Mercy Medical." "All right," he said simply, and the SUV rolled into the street. Inside the car, the heater hummed low and steady. Nora sat still, her wet jeans sticking to her legs, Luna's breath shallow and wheezy. She glanced at the man again. He looked familiar, Not like someone she'd met, but like someone you see on TV in a headline you barely notice. "I'm Nora," she said quietly. "And this is Luna." He didn't take his eyes off the road. Micah Rowan." Nora blinked. She'd heard that name before. Rowan Technologies, he was the founder. One of those names you hear when people talk about tech billionaires or startup success stories. She stared at the back of his head, unsure what to say. At a red light, Micah turned up the heater. "She needs warmth," he said. "And you're soaked." Nora nodded, not trusting her voice. After a moment, she muttered, "It's hard when the nearest bus stop's 5 blocks from home." The rest of the drive was quiet. Luna's cough had faded into slow, weak breaths. When they reached the clinic, Micah pulled into the drop-off zone and parked. "Good luck," he said simply. "I hope she gets better." Nora turned to him, her voice a whisper. "Thank you, I mean it. You didn't have to help us." Micah gave a small nod. "Take care of her." As Nora stepped out into the soft drizzle, Luna asleep against her chest, she had no idea that this small, strange mistake, this wrong car on a rainy day, was about to change everything. The rain had stopped, but the city still smelled like damp concrete and old leaves. Nora sat on the edge of her worn couch, one arm around Luna, who slept soundly with her head resting on her mother's shoulder. The soft hum of the nebulizer filled the quiet room, and beside it lay a small white paper bag with Luna's antibiotics. She couldn't stop thinking about the man in the SUV, Micah Rowan. His name echoed in her mind like a riddle. Why would someone like him, wealthy, successful, a stranger, go out of his way to help her? He had nothing to gain. No one would have blamed him if he had asked her to get out of his car, and yet he didn't. As she changed Luna's diaper and folded the now dry baby blanket, she noticed something tucked in the outer pocket of her diaper bag. A business card. It hadn't been there before. Her fingers hesitated before pulling it out. Micah, Rowan Technologies Executive Office. The lettering was simple and clean, but it made her heart race anyway. She placed the card on the coffee table and stared at it for a long time, unsure what to feel. Was it just a formality? A polite gesture? Or did it mean something more? 2 days later, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Hello? Hi, is this Nora Ellis?" The voice was female, smooth and professional. "Yes, this is Nora. This is Jenna. I'm calling on behalf of Micah Rowan. He asked if you might be available to come by the Rowan Foundation office this week. He's working on a new community project and hoped to speak with you." Nora blinked. "Me?" "Yes. He mentioned he met you earlier this week. He'd like to discuss your insight on some initiatives aimed at single parents and low-income families." Nora was silent for a beat. I'm not really someone who does meetings like that. I'm just trying to get through each day." "That's exactly why he wants to hear from you," Jenna said kindly. "It's not an interview. It's a conversation." Nora agreed to meet the next day, though her stomach twisted with nerves the entire evening. The Rowan Foundation office didn't look like what she imagined. It wasn't some shiny glass tower, but a converted brick building with climbing ivy on the front and a wide set of wooden doors. The receptionist offered her tea and a soft smile. When Micah entered the room, he wore a simple sweater and jeans. The confident air she remembered from the car was still there, but now he looked more approachable. "Thanks for coming, Nora," he said, offering a seat across from him. "I wasn't sure you'd say yes." Honestly, I wasn't sure either. He smiled lightly. "I wanted to tell you something that day in the car. It stuck with me. Seeing you carry your child through the rain, doing everything you could to keep her safe, it reminded me of someone I knew." Nora nodded slowly. "You mentioned a nephew?" Micah's smile faded a bit. "Yes. He didn't make it. My sister still blames herself for not getting help fast enough." They were quiet for a moment. "That's why I started this side project. We're launching a community-focused program to improve family housing and health access. But everything we've planned so far has come from people like me who've never lived it." "You mean rich people?" Nora said, half joking. Half not. Micah didn't flinch. Exactly. We need insight from people who understand the reality, not just the statistics. He pulled out a folder and slid it toward her. There's a small group forming next week. We'll be discussing daily challenges, childcare, rent, transportation, anything. We'll cover dinner, provide childcare, and pay a $200 stipend for your time. Nora stared at the folder. You want me to talk about my life? Yes. Because your life is the one we're trying to improve. She hesitated. She wasn't used to being asked her opinion, let alone paid for it. She wasn't sure if she could trust this. But Luna's medical bills were still sitting unpaid on her table, and the thought of someone wanting to listen, it felt rare, worth exploring. Okay, she said at last. I'll try it. Micah nodded. That's all I ask. The focus group was held in a sunny room at the community center near downtown. There were 5 women in total, all different ages and backgrounds, but every one of them carried the same tired look in their eyes, the look of women who'd fought quiet battles, day after day. Nora sat toward the back, keeping to herself at first. But when it was her turn to speak, something opened up. I'm raising Luna alone, she said quietly. I work part-time at a bakery and clean offices at night. Rent takes most of it. Childcare is almost impossible. I used to want more from life, but now I just want to keep my daughter safe. Micah listened from the corner, not interrupting, just taking notes. Afterward, he walked over as the group filtered out. You said something powerful, he told her. You used to want more. What stopped you? Nora gave a half shrug. Life. Maybe it's time to want more again, he said. Nora looked at him, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Maybe both. She left the center that night with a small envelope in her coat pocket and something even more surprising inside her chest, the beginning of hope. The following week arrived faster than Nora expected. She stood outside the Rowan Foundation office, holding Luna's diaper bag in one hand and the sleeve of her coat in the other. Her nerves buzzed in her chest like a quiet alarm. She wasn't sure why she felt uneasy. Maybe it was the thought of speaking again, or maybe it was the unfamiliar sense of being seen. Inside, the focus group was already gathering. The same group of women as last time, each one more relaxed now, chatting over coffee and cookies. There was laughter, shared stories, and something else growing between them, trust. Micah welcomed them with his usual calm. We'll be digging deeper today, he explained. We want to understand the real gaps, what's missing in your daily lives, what support actually works, and what's just noise. When it came to Nora's turn, she shared a story about sleeping on the couch with Luna during winter because the heating in her old apartment had broken. No landlord repairs, no answers. We had one little space heater, she said quietly, but I had to turn it off at night so we didn't risk a fire. Micah's expression didn't change much, but his pen didn't stop moving. After the session ended, most of the women left, hugging their kids and saying goodbyes. Nora was gathering her things when Micah approached her. Could you stay for a minute? He asked. Nora paused. Sure. He led her to a nearby office, where a digital presentation was paused on a screen. Several slides showed charts and housing, project maps. Nora didn't understand most of it, but one name stood out. Darren Levis. Micah followed her eyes. He's our CFO, he said. Handles most of the financial work for our community projects. Nora's stomach turned cold. She knew that name. Her fingers clenched around the strap of her bag. Are you all right? Micah asked. She didn't answer right away. Her voice felt stuck in her throat like words were fighting to stay buried. But this moment, this building, felt too full of truth for silence to win. Darren Levis is Luna's father, she said finally. He left when I told him I was pregnant, moved, changed numbers, blocked me everywhere. I haven't seen him in almost 2 years. Micah's face didn't change, but the room felt heavier. He never once checked on her, she continued. Never paid $1, never even asked if she was okay. I didn't tell anyone before because, what was the point? Micah leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. That's A lot. I'm not trying to cause trouble, Nora said quickly. You've done more for me in a few weeks than he ever did. I just thought you should know. Thank you for telling me, Micah said gently. You didn't deserve that. And neither did Luna. They sat in silence for a moment. Real silence. Not the kind that fills a room awkwardly, but the kind that lets things settle. Later that night, Nora sat on the edge of her bed, Luna asleep beside her. Her thoughts were loud. Too loud. But one kept repeating, "You said it." Out loud. To someone who listened. The next morning brought an unexpected text. "Can you come to Rowan HQ at 10 a.m.? There's something you should see. Micah." Nora didn't hesitate this time. She packed Luna a snack and dropped her off with a neighbor before catching a bus across town. By 10:05, she stood in a private viewing room behind the main conference hall. A glass wall gave her a clear view of the boardroom, where several people were seated around a long table. At the front, Micah stood, calm as ever. One of the men at the table was Darren. Nora froze. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like the room tilted. Micah began to speak, walking the board through a series of delayed projects, community housing plans, family health initiatives, all tied to missing funds. Then came the final slide. Bank records, shell companies, hidden payments, misdirected budgets. The evidence was clear. Darren leaned back in his chair, trying to appear unfazed. "With respect," he said, "financial planning is fluid. Priorities shift." Micah didn't raise his voice. "Funds were transferred to a private account under your brother's name. That's not budgeting, that's theft." The room went still. Micah looked toward the viewing room. Nora's breath caught. "There's one more voice this board needs to hear," he said. Someone directly impacted by Darren's decisions. A soft knock. A door opened. Nora stepped in. The room held its breath. She didn't look at Darren right away. She looked at Micah, who nodded once, steady. "My name is Nora Ellis," she said, her voice surprisingly clear. "I lived in one of the buildings these funds were meant to repair. The heat failed. The walls molded. I raised my daughter in those conditions, while the money meant for our safety disappeared." Now she turned to Darren. His face had gone pale. "You knew I lived there," she continued. "You knew I was pregnant. You disappeared." Darren tried to speak, but no words came. No excuses. Micah stepped forward. "We've verified the timeline. Nora's name appears in the tenant records, ones Darren had access to. The board chair spoke next. "Effective immediately, Darren Levis is terminated. Legal action will follow." Darren stood slowly, gathering his things without a word. As the door shut behind him, Nora let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Micah turned to her. "Thank you," he said. "That took courage." Nora looked down at her hands, which were still trembling. But inside, something had gone quiet in a good way. The silence wasn't fear anymore. It was peace. 2 months later, the sharp chill of winter had faded into soft, early spring. The sun shone a little longer. The trees bloomed with fresh green and everything felt quietly new. Nora Ellis stood at the window of her new apartment, holding Luna on her hip. The space was small but clean and filled with light. It smelled like fresh paint and something else. Hope. She had never lived in a place like this before. The apartment was part of a new community complex, one Micah's foundation had rebuilt after the scandal. It had affordable units for single parents, on-site healthcare support, and a childcare center on the ground floor. That center now had Nora's name. On the door, Nora Ellis, director. She still couldn't believe it. A month earlier, Micah had offered her the position. She had laughed at first, shaking her head like he'd made a mistake. "Me? I'm not qualified. I've never run anything. I was just a teaching assistant before Luna was born." Micah had looked at her with steady eyes. "You've raised a child on your own while working 2 jobs. You've kept going even when everything around you said stop. You've lived what most people only study in reports." "But what if I mess it up?" she whispered. "You won't," he'd replied. "Not because you'll be perfect, but because you care. That's what these families need most. And so Nora said yes. The first few days were scary. New staff, new responsibilities, new pressure. But something about walking into that bright classroom each morning, seeing children laughing, watching Luna toddle among them, it made her feel like she belonged. Micah visited often. Not in a big, flashy way. He didn't arrive with press or speeches. He came with books for the reading nook, built shelves in the back storage closet, brought Nora her favorite vanilla coffee, and picked up groceries when she worked late. He never tried to impress. He just showed up. One Sunday evening, Nora, Luna, and Micah were in the small kitchen of Nora's apartment. Luna was sitting on the floor, babbling and waving her soft toy at the cat through the screen door. Nora stirred a pot of stew while Micah assembled a tiny bookshelf he'd brought over from the store. As he screwed the last piece into place, he looked up. "She said something today," he said quietly. "Luna." Nora raised an eyebrow, smiling. "Oh no, did she ask for snacks again?" Micah shook his head, grinning. "She pointed at her crib and said, 'Mine.'" Nora laughed softly, wiping her hands on a towel. "She never had her own bed until now." Micah stood and walked over to her, pulling something small from a bag. "I made her this." He held out a tiny linen pillow. Soft, stitched in pale green thread were the words, "Luna loved. Home." Nora stared at it, blinking hard. "You embroidered this?" He shrugged, a little sheepish. "She told me she never had a pillow of her own. I figured it was time." Her eyes welled with tears, but this time they weren't from sadness. "You didn't have to." "I know," he said quietly, "but I wanted to." She reached out, taking his hand. No words, just a long, warm silence. A few weeks later, the community center opened its doors officially. Parents arrived with their kids, some carrying bags, some carrying worries. Nora welcomed each one with a smile and a clipboard. She remembered how it felt to walk into unfamiliar places, uncertain if anyone would care. She made sure they knew they mattered here. In the corner of the entryway, she hung a simple wooden sign. In soft script, it read, "This place exists because someone believed we still could bloom." The staff didn't ask who the quote was about. They didn't need to. One morning, as spring sunshine streamed through the windows, Luna took her first real steps. She wobbled between Nora and Micah, arms outstretched, laughing wildly. She reached both their hands at once, tiny fingers grasping with pure joy. They laughed too, big, full laughs that filled the room and carried into the hallway. There were no grand speeches, no big promises. Just a moment, just a family, born not from blood but from choice. Now, Nora walks through the halls of the center every morning. Her steps are steady. Her voice is strong. She still gets nervous sometimes. She still worries. But now, she also believes in herself, in what she's building, and in what's possible. If this story moved you, subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. For more true-to-life tales that remind us all, family isn't always who we're born to. Sometimes it's who shows up when it matters most, because a single mistake can still lead you to exactly where you were meant to be.